formerly known as the Beanbag Bop, but we're not calling it that because it's formerly known as that. So
no bop.
no
Got it.
bop,
Bop.
Flop.
flop, flop. This is not the Beanbag Bop, formerly known as that, because we're not calling it that
Yep.
due to unforeseen issues.
Unforeseen.
This is not that
From Dak Dortmund.
from Dak Dartman.
Gotcha.
If you are a fan of our previous segment, formerly known as, let that guy know that he's really ruined a good thing. So this is now going to be called BB, the BB segment, for now until we find a better working name. But in this segment, we bring in Nate, our official referee of the show. We ask him referee questions. We get his opinion. Welcome back, Nate. Glad to have you.
Glad to be back. It feels like it's been way too long.
And it has. It has. So the first one I want to talk about is you're a referee and you see two grown-ass men fighting. Seems like a recurring thing we have you on for. What do you do as a referee in that situation?
So in that situation, whether it's coaches, whether it's players, we are always told, don't get in there and put yourself in harm's way. Especially if it's players, you just step back, take out your little game card out of your shirt pocket, write down numbers and jersey colors. That way you can come back afterwards and say, all right, we're going to disqualify number 50 in white, number 14 in red, and so on and so forth.
Do you have, as far as escorting them and when they get disqualified, who's in charge of making sure they leave the area?
I mean, once the officials are on the field, we are held responsible for the players of the field. So we would be taking them off the field. However, they don't want us breaking it up and putting ourselves in there.
So that's my point. So like you have an angry person who you've now disqualified. You also have a game to ref. How do you leave the game to make sure that person leaves?
Ideally, if we can, we try to de-escalate that situation by sending those players out beforehand. Like if we see them start to get a little mouthy with each other or shoving each other late, we'll say, hey, go sit down and cool off. And we'll tell their coach, hey, take number 50 there, set him out for a couple of plays, and then send him back in. Because that's the last thing these coaches want, to their kids to get disqualified. And then I think in high school, you have to miss the next game, if not the next 2 games.
Gotcha.
And in high school, you only play 10 regular season games. So missing out on 1 game, let alone 2, is huge for some of these schools.
Next topic. Similar situation. 2 teammates fighting, such as this Houston game. There's no real penalty for beating the shit out of your teammate. What do you do as a ref? You look over and
If it's out on the sideline away from the play, and like you said, it's 2 teammates, coaches, that's all you.
When we talk about things we should put on t-shirts, there's no real penalty for beating the shit out of your teammate. Should be in the running.
Got it.
I don't know, a little wordy.
Lastly, Nate. My last. So let's say a official, let's call it a coach, a player, anybody that is a part of the operation of a football game gets mad at you, the referee. What is your role as the ref? What does that conversation look like with that person who's mad at you? Like, is there a code of conduct for you? Like, or can you actually just lay into that person? Be like, hey, get out of my effing face.
I mean, ideally, you're not just going to go up and say, get out of my effing face. You're going to try, just like any other disagreement or whatever you have in real life, you're going to try to de-escalate the situation. You're not going to come in there and fight. So, I mean, you're going to try to, if it's relating to the rules of football or anything during the game like that, you're going to explain what you saw to the coach or the player or whomever. But yeah, if you go in there and try to fight fire with fire, it's just going to end up bad.
Gotcha. But is there like a code of conduct for a referee? Like, these are the things that you like are not supposed to say, or is it like common sense?
Basically common sense. There's nothing in writing that says like, don't say this, don't say that. But
gotcha.
I mean, there are like sometimes where they'd say, hey, like if you're ever going to go talk to a coach, you make sure there's always 2 of you. especially if it's like a heated situation. That way, if they try to say, well, oh, well, he told me this or he told me that, you have someone else there to verify what was going on.
Gotcha. You know what? I have another scenario. I missed you. I got a lot of things.
Sure.
The topic of home cooking
Mm-hmm.
or intentional targeting. So let's say that it's a high school game. You know that there's a player from an opposing school that like without them, this team's going to go down. So you have intentional hitting of that player. You're trying to take that player out of the game, and you're seeing a lot of aggression towards one player, where they're trying to physically hurt that player. What role do you have to be like, hey, we see you taking some big hits on this guy. We see the shit on underneath the pile. Let's knock that off.
I think it goes back to the same thing like we talked about before with the fighting and whatnot is you're going to go up there, you're going to talk to the players and let them know, hey, if you see like a late hit or if you see any chirping after the play, you're going to try to do some preventative stuff. Because the last thing we want to do, especially if it's early on, is you don't want to hit someone with an unsportsmanlike, because 2 of those and you're done. And it goes back to the same thing. You miss the next game. So you want to try to nip that in the bud as early as possible.
Gotcha.
And like you said, if you've got one guy on a team, especially like you usually see that in the smaller school situations where they've got one stud athlete and everybody knows that he's getting the ball. Everybody's going to try to get him out of the game, whatever. So your antenna's going to go up and say, hey, we really need to make sure here, especially in rivalry games too, because we're starting to get to that point now where the high school season's almost halfway over, where you're going to start to see some regional rivalries. So you got to be on your toes.
Gotcha.
Nate, I want to put you in the shoes of an NFL referee because I know this doesn't happen in the same way in the high school ranks.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a pile for a fumble.
Mm-hmm.
What are you saying to players to get them off of the pile?
Oh,
Because
that's a
they're
good
all
one, huh?
digging. Because this happened in the end of the Cardinals Raiders game. There was a pile up after the Hunter ran for a fumble, and I could very much tell that there were officials in the ears, quite literally in the ears of players, yelling at them and telling them to get off of the pile because they were trying to figure out who had the ball. Well, obviously we all know underneath the pile there's all sorts of very nasty things and things that people will never speak of what happens at the bottom of the pile. What would you say as an NFL official in the ear of a grown-ass NFL player to make him understand that he needs to get off the pile right now?
I mean, I don't know what I would tell some 280-pound, 300-pound lineman to get up off the ground. But, I mean, I think I would say, look, dude, get up. You clearly don't have the ball. There's 4 or 5 guys under you. Just get up. But it's like same thing in high school, though. Like, you get everybody there. It's like they want us to go in there and start digging. They don't want the players to start digging, but they want the officials to go in there and dig. Find out who has the ball. And same thing, it's like roll off, get up, whatever. And especially, it's always the guys that seem to come on late that think they're going to dive in there through 2 or 3 players and miraculously come up with the ball.
Yeah, I think the guys that dive on late are just there to help give the people at the bottom of the pile more time. Like that's the only reason I see the people diving on.
Yeah, because who knows how many times it changes hands, but we try to get there as soon as possible and try to get it who initially had it.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of a player come out of the bottom of the huddle or a coach come to you or somebody else on your team after the fact and say, hey, at the bottom of the pile, there was this bullshit going on. What are we going to do about it?
I don't think that. I mean, there are times where coaches and players both say, hey, my player's saying that after the play or whatever, they're getting stepped on or someone's twisting their ankle, things like that. So usually if you're working in the middle of the field or if you have a tackle over on your sideline and you hear that, you try to pay a little bit more attention to that. But at the same time, you also want to be a good dead ball official and watch what's going on around you to make sure you don't have a wide receiver and a DB down the field throwing each other to the ground or anything stupid like that either.
Got it. Alex, did you see anything over the weekend or at the Steeler game?
So the only thing that I had was there was a punt, the very first punt from the Steelers. The guy from the Patriots touched it, kind of like a muff, and it rolled into the end zone. He jumped on it. There was like some scuffle for the ball, and it ultimately ended up rolling out of the back of the end zone.
Mhm.
Is it not a safety because he did not catch the ball and establish that he had caught the ball? I thought once you touched it, it was a live ball.
So once you touch it, you have the kicking team can then jump on it. So this goes back to one of the things I struggled with when I first started is the force rule. What put the ball into the end zone? The punt put the ball into the end zone.
Okay.
Not the player gaining possession and fumbling, but the initial punt off the punter's foot. So yeah, he touched it. So then it's a free grab for anybody, but it can keep rolling, go back out the end zone for a touchback.
I got you. Okay. So if the Steelers would have jumped on it, it still would have been a touchdown, but
Correct.
because I got you. Okay. Because he didn't really
But
fumble
since
it
the
out.
return team never possessed the ball,
So he
you can't
technically
have
never fumbled it.
safety.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That makes more sense actually than I thought.
I feel like this has been a good time back, Nate.
Yeah,
Very
bring out the
informative.
force, not something that comes up every so often.
Good
Very
stuff.
good.
And maybe next week we'll have your better half with you as well.
Yeah, she should be en route back now, but I don't think she's going to quite make it tonight.
Tell her she might have to think up new little snippets for the whatever we're going to call this.
To be determined, formerly known as the Beanbag Bomb.
Mhm.
Flop, flop.
Well,
That wraps up the first time Nate's on with us this year. Nate will be back every week that he's available, most weeks, to join us for NFL breakdown, college football talk, and do the other things. So thank you, Nate, as always.
Thank you. See you guys next week.
And flop, flop.